another episode. CRM Radio today. The voice of customer relationship management. A bi-weekly program that tackles the ever-changing world of CRM. Brought to you by the good folks at GoldMine that never make mistakes like I just did. And our host, the chief tackler, the chief linebacker for CRM, Stacy Gentile. Hey, Stacy.
Hey, Paul. How's it going?
I'm doing good. I know you guys don't make these kind of mistakes. You never call CRM CM.
I don't know. Maybe we should change it.
Customer manager. We'll just get
like
the
that. Let's just go with CM.
Let's just cut it down.
It's easier.
Everything's
simpler.
Getting shorter and shorter. You know, we've got Jennifer Lopez's J-Lo. So maybe
that's right.
We need to shorten the whole subject matter here. Well, we're not going to give a short conversation today. We're going to give you full tilt, full 20 minutes or so to talk about whatever's on your mind today. What guest did you bring and what topic we're going to talk about today?
Well, on today's show, we've got Kevin Smith, who's actually with us here at GoldMine. He's one of our channel managers, and he's one of our Legionnaire extraordinaire experts. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, how are you, Paul? Hi, Stacy.
Hey, how's it going? And Kevin hails from the great country of Canada, where they just won the basketball championship.
Wow. And you sound like you're Canadian, and he doesn't. I don't understand.
Well, I'm from northern Wisconsin originally, so every now and then some of my Canadian accent slips out. My wife, who's from Mexico, we were on a plane not too long ago, and she told somebody that, my husband's from northern Wisconsin, right on the border with Canada. And I'm like, no. There's a big body of water between us.
Oh, it's close enough. It's closer than Mexico is.
I haven't let her live that one down. So every time something about Canada comes up, I'm always like, yep, right on the border with Wisconsin.
Well, all I know is every time I listen to you, I'm from the Midwest, all I hear is that Canadian accent screaming through, however it slipped over the border here. And Kevin, I talked to him earlier. I didn't hear any of it, so I don't understand.
Well, maybe I've been talking to Stacy too much. It's starting to wear off. I don't know.
Well, I'll do my best to suppress it today. So on today's show with Kevin, I think what we're going to be talking about is Kevin's top 5 tips to use your CRM. Right, Kevin? Yeah,
absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. I've listened to several of the podcasts over the last few months and always found it informative and interesting. So looking forward to it.
These should be good tips because, Kevin, you've been with GoldMine for 20 years.
Yeah, and I was with Maximizer for 4 years before that, another pioneer of the CRM industry, and sort of been doing this for, a long time. I'm starting to give away
Forever.
My age here, but it's almost like 27 years of, in one way or the other, working in the contact management or CRM industry for sure.
Right. All right. So let's jump right into it. What's your number 1 tip?
Yeah. So my first tip, honestly, was something that was mentioned earlier in the following commercial before getting started here, and it was keeping it simple. It's one of our mottos at GoldMine. I've been doing this, like I mentioned, for like 27 years, Stacy, and the one thing I hear from companies that have struggled with their CRM implementations is it tends to be somewhat overly complex. I hear the same, argument over and over again. It's like, we love the idea, we love the concept, we spent a lot of time building this out, we brought in external resources, we talked to all the management, and we built this really sophisticated system, but it's just that. It's too sophisticated in a lot of ways. And especially if you're implementing CRM for the first time, you want to keep it simple and don't over-engineer it. So it's kind of like it seems like something that you would just assume, but you'd be surprised how often it happens. And you just got to, think about the people that are going to be using this, and they may not all be, computer savvy like yourselves, right? So think about, let's take the easiest way to implement this, make this as simple, as less obtrusive as possible, and try to reduce the amount of data entry that somebody actually has to do and there's lots of tools for doing that. But that should be your mindset for success, and it's, I think, probably the most critical factor for organizations when they're looking at implementing a CRM or even just re-engineering their existing one.
Right, because at the end of the day, the employees of the organization have to actually use the system, and beyond that, they have to want to use it, right? Because if it's complicated, they're going to be like, "Ugh, I'm not doing that."
Well, you hit it right on the head, right? You're bang on. And the other thing is, it's all about, one of my other points, it's all about the data. But if it's difficult to use, let's be honest, salespeople, you could do a podcast on this as well too. But salespeople, unfortunately, are inherently somewhat lazy. We try to do things the easiest way, get results, but we want to do it the quickest and easiest way we can. And the way business runs today is a lot different than when I was, first started 25, 26 years ago. There's salespeople really do have to do more with less, right? We're asked to do, we've got to fill out these forms, and like this whole electronic and computer revolution, frankly, hasn't made it really any easier for salespeople. In a lot of ways, it's made it more difficult. And if you can make like your CRM solution a tool that actually benefits them without all the hard work and administrative work, you're going to see the results. But you're bang on that comment.
And one thing I've noticed in the industry, and obviously, Kevin, you've been in it longer than I have. How much of this is to blame with the complexity actually on our own industry? Because if you look at a lot of the CRM platforms out there that compete with GoldMine, every one of them just keeps adding in more and more and more features. And they do that so that, in the sales process, you can say, look, this company only does 1, 2, and 3, but we do 1 through 3,000. And then when you're the buyer, you're like, oh, well, let's go with the bigger solution because it does 3,000 things. But then when you install it, you're like, we're just going to use 3 things. Right.
Yeah, exactly. We used to use this coin a long time ago when I was actually I started out as a developer, and one of my first project leads told me this, and it rings true today. 27 years ago it rang through, but you can design and develop to a level where you cause feature paralysis for the users, right? You're just putting in features that may not necessarily be all that advantageous to your bigger audience, and the problem that you have is you just added another level of complexity for the person that just basically wants to be able to get the information out quickly, log a quick sales report, log a quick call report, and sometimes all these other features just frankly cause confusion. So,
right. So the big lesson, right. Would you agree then that the big lesson there is, for somebody who's about to buy or switch to a new CRM system is don't get, all googly-eyed with the number of features, but more so focus on the things you're actually going to use day in and day out.
Yeah, and this is kind of where, if you work with, and I see this a lot too, Stacy, is that you'll see organizations that they have their own internal teams, and each internal team has their own reason for wanting to implement that CRM solution. And sometimes this, too, is where a consultant, an external consultant, can come in and sort of say, what are the key things that really we want to accomplish with this project? And, sort of take all the information from all the different interest groups within the organization and then pare it down and say, okay, this is what we really should try to accomplish in a phase 1. You know what? Let's keep it simple. Let's keep it basic. That way everybody's going to use it. If people use it, we're going to get good data. Good data means good decisions, right? If you build something that people don't use, you're not going to get the good decisions. But my point is, then you can reevaluate this like on a phase 2. So reassess your CRM implementation. I have a partner up here in Canada that does these, what they call like 6-month reassessments of their customers. And it's one of the most, I see as one of the most beneficial things that they do. And I hear great feedback from their customers because, their business changes, their needs change, and that reassessment will kind of like, tip them off on something maybe that they should be implementing. And these this whole idea of just trying to bite off too much can be a real failing factor. And the other thing you see too, right, is when you do have a failure, it turns everybody off of CRM for the next 2 years until maybe new management comes in or something, right? So if you can do it right first, not bite off too much, and then reassess yourself, in 6 months, and then look at doing a phase 2 or phase 3. There's nothing wrong with that approach, and in most cases, frankly, from what I've seen, it's one that works.
So what's your second biggest tip?
Well, the second biggest tip kind of plays along with the first tip, in that you want your tool to be flexible. So we talked about these reassessments that you might want to do 6 months or a year into your implementation of a CRM. When you have that kind of a situation, there are going to be things that you're going to need to add, modify, customize, maybe change your workflow a little bit. You want to make sure that you have a tool that provides some of that gives you that ability to be flexible and change that workflow. I see this quite often. No two CRM or no two companies really implement CRM exactly the same way. So you need to be able to tweak it and customize it. And again, this is hitting back on where that reassessment idea comes into play. It's a perfect fit for that. So you definitely want to choose a tool that gives you that flexibility to add fields, customize your workflow, change how you do business a little bit.
Right, because there really isn't a CRM solution that will come straight out of the box that will give you everything you need. It's going to require that customization, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I will say most of the tools today actually do this really quite well. When I started out in implementing what we called contact management back in the 90s, this was a rarity, frankly. You didn't see the tools that were able to allow you to customize your workflow and add fields and create categories and create roles inside of the organization. A sales role, a customer service role, a marketing role. Most of the tools today now have really embraced that technology and that concept, and most of them do it really quite well.
So who do you think inside the organization really owns that customization process, and when is it best applied? Before they buy a new CRM system or after? Well,
the first question about, who owns it, I think it should be done, and again, where I see it done most successfully is by a small group that represents the major factions within the organization that are, frankly, the primary users of the tool. Not every department inside the organization is going to use the CRM. I mean, that's the reality. We like to think that, CRM is a strong enough reason for every department inside the organization to use it, but in reality that rarely happens. You'll typically see a sales department, a customer service department, maybe a marketing department that use it, and you want representation from each of those groups. So have one person or two people from each of those groups, and sort of that small group representing the bigger user base, those are the ones that should sort of decide those kind of policies and changes that should happen to the system. And
so do you think companies are doing a good job of identifying how they want to customize it, like before they either get a new one or switch, or is it something they try to do afterwards and then shoehorn their needs into something they already bought?
Well, we see it both ways. So that's a great point that you bring up. And I've seen it done successfully both ways. I've seen organizations, with this whole keep it simple idea, they'll implement their CRM and they'll kind of almost do it out of the box. A few minor customizations, some workflow changes to fit their, generic business. But I'll use the term out of the box, and then they'll use it for a while and get an idea of what's lacking, that whole idea of that reassessment, and then they'll do that further customization. So it really truly is kind of like a work in progress, and that works quite well. That will happen regardless of how you implement your CRM. If you go in and do all that legwork up front, the reality is that you're still going to have to do those modifications as things change down the road anyways. So both approaches work. It really depends on your business and frankly your experience with CRM that you've previously had. I would say that probably for organizations that are just starting out using CRM, you probably want to go with the more out-of-the-box method. Of course, if you've been using CRM and you're a little bit more sophisticated organization with respect to customer relationship management, you're probably have a little bit more experience, and you can do those customizations up front prior to actually doing the implementation of the new software.
Okay. Well, I think when we come back from our commercial break, because it's about that time, we will come back to the last remaining 3.
Sounds great.
Take it away, Paul.
We know you rely on your CRM system, and it's usually a love-hate relationship. Most CRM systems, well, let's face it, they're expensive. They're hard to understand. People don't use them properly. And you're probably paying for features that you don't even want. If that's your case, then maybe it's time to simplify. It's time to get more from your CRM. Why don't you go back to the original? Trust GoldMine. We helped pioneer the industry, after all. GoldMine CRM is, well, it's simple, it's affordable, and it's proven. If all those sound appealing to you, if you're just tired of the CRM headaches that you're getting from trying to implement something that's just too complicated, too expensive, and too much for you to figure out, then why not go back to the original? Visit GoldMine today, goldmine.com. And let's pick it back up with Stacy and his fellow Canadian speaker here.
All right, Kevin, what's number 3 on your list?
All right, so number 3 I call all about the data. So with this concept or tip, I try to tell people to be creative where you capture data for your solution, and in a lot of ways, when I implemented CRM, back in the 90s, a lot of it really hasn't changed that much in the sense that it's still about the relationship, right, and managing the relationships. Organizations that manage relationships well typically do better in business, right? They do better in sales. They tend to keep their customers longer. But the data that feeds that objective and actually drives that whole process of having better relationships has changed over the years, right? So you have to be creative about different ways that you can feed data into your CRM system. So, some of the things that we see today that's quite interesting is things like LinkedIn or reverse IP lookup, right? When somebody visits your website, Stacy, where did they come from? Maybe they didn't fill out a form, but where did they come from? What pages were they looking at? How long did they spend on the page? All that kind of information doesn't require somebody typing it in. It can be all automated, but these are really relevant ways of capturing information about your prospects and potential customers, right? So data is critical, and you be creative. Think about where I can get these different data sources from my organization and how I can get them in without actually having to have my salespeople or my clerical people or my admin or my customer service people actually have to manually get that information in the system.
So with all your years of experience in CRM, what are you noticing any old trends or new trends about how companies are kind of pre-planning how they're going to use the data in the CRM system? Like how much forethought are they putting into it before they perhaps do an install? Yeah,
so this is one of the the one areas where a good consultant that's been doing this for a while is a great resource for you because they can maybe point out things that you might not actually even think about. The more traditional ways, some of the more traditional ways of doing it that are still completely relevant is like your website, right? So web capture forms. Somebody bumps up in goes up to your website and is interested in a particular product or service that you're selling. Yeah, they fill out a form and we have some workflow that kicks in and enters that information into the system and then schedules phone calls and follow-ups and so forth. That's been out there for over 20 years. Interestingly enough, GoldMine's had web import since our version 4, which was back in 1998. So, but it's still relevant. People still need to do that today. Where we're starting to see some of the newer stuff is, for instance, the smartphone revolution, right? So people walking around with their smartphones and they walk out of a meeting and they bring up their smartphone, they pop up their CRM application, and they'll speak into Siri and record the details of that meeting. They may attach some workflow that schedules follow-ups, and it's all done instantly. It's not like going back to the office or scribbling it down on a pad after the meeting and then sending it to somebody to fill in or whatever. So that is changing. And the other thing you sort of see with smartphone, Stacy, and you probably are aware of this as well too, is that in the future where this is taking as far as mobile computing is, we're starting to track now when you are, walking down the street and you go into, a restaurant or you go into Best Buy or whatever, Google and all these analytic companies now are capturing that information, and you'll notice you'll be in some store and you'll see later on in that day you'll get an ad for that store on your Facebook or what have you. That's the next wave of, I believe, CRM data inputs where they're grabbing that information now and passing it to you, and you can use that, and you can see where your prospects and customers, are visiting if you're, for instance, in the retail industry. But if you start to see that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because there's so many new inputs of data coming from everywhere. And I think where CRM really plays the keyest role in that data is it's the center of the hub, right? It's everything's plugging into the CRM system. And then typically what it'll do is it'll visualize that data so that executives and managers, they can track the KPIs of the organization and then use that to drive individual activity, right? Because at the end of the day, that's why you have the data, is to change an action.
And it's revolutionizing how we look at this, right? Like, we never thought about this before, but, there's so much information now that's being tracked about us. We might get a little bit worried from time to time. You think about it seems a little bit Orwellian, but it's there. And like it or not, somebody else is using that information, so you might as well be using it yourself. And I think that's kind of like you're going to see the next wave as far as CRM data inputs along those lines.
All right, what's your number 4?
Number 4, well, we touched on this a little bit earlier. Engaging other areas in your organization as far as CRM use. So when I implemented CRM many, many years ago, we thought of it really as a sales tool, right? And we even used for a while there, and I'm sure you're aware of this too, we used to use the acronym SFA, right? Which was Salesforce Automation, not the other acronym. But and that's how a lot of people just thought, frankly, as CRM tools. And you'll look at products out there like SalesLogix or Salesforce.com. They still have that sales connotation within their products. But here's the reality. There's a lot of benefits for organizations outside of sales with respect to using CRM. So, we see it, in customer service, right? Accounting, but you'll also see it in areas like order fulfillment and shipping and logistics and engineering and marketing, accounting. There's all these different areas where CRM actually makes sense. Because at the end of the day, what good CRMs do is they track interactions, right? And it doesn't matter if you're having an interaction with a supplier or a customer. If you get to know that supplier and you want to track, your conversations and so forth, what better tool than an interaction tracking tool, which really CRM is, to do that?
So then in our final minute, because we're running out of time, what's the 5th tip you got?
Yeah, so the 5th tip is pretty straightforward. It's training, right? So training is critical. It's one of those expenses up front that a lot of organizations try to, frankly, cut back on. Right? Because it's one of those things that you say, do I really need to do the training? I've spent all this time implementing and understanding the product. I'm sure I can just do it myself and just learn from some videos and so forth. Videos and self-training is great, but I am a strong believer of bringing an actual trainer in to train your people on the system using your own data. These are great tips. It does add to the cost a little bit, but I believe it's really well-spent money.
Right, because people are a lot more temperamental than computers.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, totally. And a lot of organizations you'll see they'll use train the trainer as well, right? They'll just train one person inside their organization and then have them train the rest. But it's a good investment.
Well, awesome. Hey, Kevin, thanks for coming on our program today. So in closing, if somebody wants to continue the conversation with you or learn more about GoldMine, how can they reach you?
Well, they can just go up to www.goldmine.com and, just click on the Contact Us. By all means, we'd be more than happy to chat with them. We also, you can reach us on our 1-800 number, too, which is 1-800-443-5457, and that'll ring right through to one of our engineers.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on today's program, Kevin.
Thanks so much, Stacy.
Okay, take it away, Paul.
You've been listening to another example of CRM Radio today from the good folks at GoldMine, right here on the Funnel Radio Network for at-work listeners.